The origins of life, a mystery that is still yet to be solved by mankind. But we are getting closer and closer to the answer day by day. And we have many theories and hypotheses to basically prove where life even came from. Life didn't just come from anything. Living things always come from living things, and that's been proven a long time ago. But where did those first living things even come from? Well, there's a special experiment that was done in 1952 called the Miller-Urey experiment, and the Miller-Urey experiment kind of proved and paved the way to a whole new perspective on how life even works. So what was the Miller-Urey experiment, and why was it so groundbreaking that this one experiment changed how we understand life and the origins of life forever? Well, in this episode, I'm going to take you behind the science of this experiment, tell you more about it, and connect this with our understanding of life. Let's get right into the science. Let's go. So what was the Miller-Urey experiment? Well, this is an experiment conducted in 1952 by two scientists named Stanley Miller and Harold Urey. And they were trying to prove the idea that life started from non-living matter. It's basically saying that that life or organic things, it came about from something that was inorganic or wasn't living. So non-living things and elements made up the things that would make up living things. And this is kind of a new idea back then. It was established earlier, but they were the first to prove this idea. And this experiment was very, very interesting. It actually had a lot of things going on inside of it. So it was a series of test tubes, and these test tubes had a Bunsen burner under it, and it was a very, very complex experiment, but I'll break it down for you right now. Basically, what they did is they simulated the conditions that Earth would have billions or even millions of years ago before life even existed. So this is kind of to simulate what the Earth would be like, and what the Earth was like was not at all what it's like today. There was a bunch of lightning, a lot of toxic gases like ammonia and hydrogen and sulfur, and all of those all in the air. And there was just water on the Earth's surface, and it kept boiling, and the water cycle was going on. And this all plays a big role in how life may have started. This experiment was a system of interconnected test tubes that had water, and as water was boiled by a Bunsen burner. It kind of boils the water, and it sends it up these tubes. It goes to one giant kind of test tube or beaker, whatever you like to call it, on top, and it condenses and comes back down. Well, there's also electricity being sent through that to simulate lightning. So we have water cycle and we have lightning. These are two of the things that were common in Earth's atmosphere and on Earth billions of years ago. And this experiment also involved passing this electric spark through a mixture of methane, ammonia, and hydrogen in the presence of water. So these three elements were inside of this giant system that they had set up, and the water was just going through it. It was cycling through, and they even had a little area where they could sample this water because they wanted to see if these non-organic chemicals could make something that was organic through this entire process. So they waited a very long time, and eventually, after a few weeks to few months, they started seeing some kind of residue forming inside of the water. And they took a closer look at it, and they started examining it throughout time, and through the scientific process that they use, they figured out there were amino acids being formed. Amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. Proteins are located inside of our cells, and these proteins are important for many different cellular functions. They're kind of the foundation for life. Even though cells are the smallest unit of life, amino acids are the organic materials that are kind of the foundation for all proteins and eventually all life. This combination of electricity and these different elements and water and it all cycling through kind of proves that this life and organic materials can form throughout time, and it can form or inorganic materials into organic materials. You see, as this happens, it starts getting complex reactions taking place, and eventually you get very complex compounds that happen, and eventually the building blocks for life, amino acids, and many other organic chemicals that were maybe the building blocks for life. And maybe that's what happened on Earth millions of years ago. And this is what this Miller-Urey experiment proves, and it's such a groundbreaking discovery because it gives us an entirely new light to shine on a different part of this mystery of origins of life, because it kind of uncovers this large part that was missing, the missing piece of the puzzle before 1952. Before they published their work, this was one of the most groundbreaking discoveries people have made, and it's a very interesting experiment as well because it proves that even though we are so complex, we all start out as this tiny little thing just in Earth's atmosphere and on Earth billions of years ago, and that led life needs life. So life to life, that's how everything works, living things to living things. So eventually just led to us living on Earth right now. Discover this again. It's so cool. All the science of life and biology is just very, very interesting. All right, before I go, let's review what we learned in this episode. In this episode, we learned that the Miller-Urey experiment was an experiment conducted by two scientists in 1952, and it involved taking different elements and putting them inside of test tubes, heating up the water to simulate the water cycle, and striking electricity through to simulate lightning. All of this simulated the conditions on Earth billions of years ago, before life even existed. And eventually, over time, they started noticing amino acids and other complex organic materials being formed in that test tube, and they really didn't do anything before it. They made sure everything was sterile and everything. How did this even happen? Well, it's all because of all this synthesis and all these things coming together, which led to this Miller-Urey experiment to be a success. And they finally proved that non-organic things can come from non-organic things. And it set the foundation for the origins of life that we are still uncovering to this day. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Spectacular Science. Spectacular Science produced and hosted by me, Akshay Jayaraman. Our theme song, additional music are by Charan Ramachandran. Please visit my podcast website, spectacularsci.com, to find interactive activities, articles, and blog posts. That's spectacularsci.com. Do you have a science question you want to answer on a Spectacular Science episode and get a special shout out? Grab an adult and head over to spectacularsci.com/contact. There you can find a contact form. You send me your amazing science questions. Thank you so much. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening right now. It really encourages me, and you'll be updated on all the new episodes. So subscribe and share this podcast with your friends and family. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Spectacular Science next week. In the meantime, keep thinking about science.